In case we have never met, I'm Michael Price, and I want to help you succeed in growing your business.
Welcome, I'm Michael Price, your host.
And I'm Nancy, your co-host.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. It is Tuesday, February 17th, 2026, and I have to say, if you're working in the federal space right now, especially if you're one of the, thousands of companies holding a government contract, you might be feeling a very specific kind of exhaustion.
It's a fatigue born of anticipation, isn't it? It's the waiting game that it never seems to end.
It is. It's what I'm calling compliance deja vu.
Mm-hmm.
For the last, what has it been, 3-4 years?
Mm-hmm.
The entire industry has been staring directly at the Pentagon.
Right. All eyes on DoD.
We've been obsessed with CMMC, the Cybersecurity Maturity Model Certification. It was the bogeyman. It was the get ready or get out mandate for the Department of Defense. And, well, while we were all hyper-focused on that front door, something massive just happened around the back of the house.
That is the absolute perfect way to frame it. While the spotlight was, burning a hole in the Pentagon's lawn, the General Services Administration, the GSA, they just quietly walked into the room.
Bypassed all the fanfare.
Completely.
Mm-hmm.
And dropped a procedural update that fundamentally, and I mean fundamentally, changes the game for the entire civilian side of the federal market.
And that is the hook for today's deep dive. We are not talking about a proposed law. We aren't talking about some draft that might happen in 2028.
No, this is now.
We're looking at the GSA's new IT security procedural guide. And the aha moment for me, the thing that really stopped me in my tracks when I was reading through these sources is this: the GSA isn't waiting for Congress.
No, they are not. And that's the big twist here.
They aren't waiting for the federal rulemaking process to finish its, agonizing crawl. They're using something called procedural guidance to enforce strict CUI, controlled unclassified information, protections right now.
As in, effectively immediately.
It just feels, is that allowed?
It's a fascinating bureaucratic, I guess you could call it a hack. It works because it's not a law that applies to the whole country. It's a house rule. They're basically saying, look, if you want to come into the GSA's house and do business with us, these are the new rules. Take it or leave it.
So our mission today is to decode this. We're not just going to read the table of contents. We need to explain how a contractor who has spent years and a lot of money pivoting towards CMMC now has to adjust their entire stance for the GSA.
It's a major pivot.
We are going to map out what the GSA calls showstoppers, which is a frankly terrifying term for a bureaucrat to use.
It gets your attention, doesn't it?
It does. We're going to break down their new 5-phase cycle, and we're going to get into the weeds of why, all of a sudden, privacy seemed to have become the new security.
And that privacy piece, you mentioned it, but I have to stress, that is the sleeper hit of this whole guidance. That is the curveball that is going to strike out a lot of otherwise prepared contractors.
I want to start with the strategic context because I think it explains the why. My first reaction, like I said, was, wait, they can just do that? I thought the whole point of federal regulation was that we had a standardized rule for CUI. There was a draft published back in, January of 2025, right?
Correct. January 2025. That was the big proposed rule.
So what happened to it? Where did it go?
It got stuck in the mud. And this is really important for listeners to understand about the machinery of government. There's a formal federal rule for CUI. The draft went out. The public comments closed in March 2025, and now, here in February 2026, that rule is listed as being in staff processing.
Staff processing, that sounds like the place where good ideas go to die a slow, painful death.
It's essentially regulatory purgatory. I mean, you have thousands of public comments to go through. You have the RIRO review, that's the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs, and that process can take years.
But the threats aren't waiting years.
And that's exactly what the GSA decided. They looked at the threat landscape, ransomware, state-sponsored hacks, major supply chain attacks, and they essentially said, we do not have years.
So they just bypassed it?
They sidestepped it. By issuing this IT security procedural guide, they aren't creating a regulation that has the force of law for the general public.
It's a legal distinction.
It's a subtle legal distinction with a massive, massive practical impact. They're saying, we aren't regulating you, the public. We are just telling you that if you want this GSA contract, you must agree to these internal procedures.
And that is incredibly clever. It's also a little terrifying if you're a contractor who thought, the main CUI rule is stalled, so I have another 18 months to get my act together.
Exactly. It signals a huge amount of impatience. The agencies, they want defense-grade security for civilian contracts, and they wanted it yesterday. The analysis we saw from Baker Hostetler was very clear on this. They called it a signal that the times are a-changin'.
that the gap is closing.
The gap between defense and civilian is disappearing right before our eyes.
That really is the convergence we're seeing. I think for a long time there was this mental model where you had two separate worlds,
Absolutely, two universes.
You had the DoD contractors, the companies building missiles and jets, and they had the high security, the intense audits, the scary clearances, and then you had the civilian side.
Right? The people selling, office furniture to the Department of the Interior or building websites for the GSA.
And that civilian side felt, relaxed.
Trust-based is the polite term that was often used.
Right, trust-based, which, let's be honest, really meant self-attestation.
It meant you signed a piece of paper that said, "Yes, I am secure." And the government said, "Okay, we believe you, here's the money."
That era is officially over.
Buried. The GSA is adopting the DoD's playbook. They are moving from that self-attestation model to structured verification. They want you to prove it.
But let's clarify the technical baseline here, because this is important. If I'm a listener and I spent the last 2 years and a small fortune building my network to comply with CMMC, am I starting over from scratch?
No, and that is the silver lining here, if there is one. The technical bedrock is still NIST SP 800-1.
Okay, so revision 3, the what hasn't changed.
The what is mostly the same. If you've configured your firewalls, if you've set up your encryption, hardened your endpoints based on NIST 800-171, you are keeping all of that. You aren't ripping out your infrastructure.
Thank goodness.
But the process, the wrapper around those controls, how you report on them, how you validate them, and especially how you handle privacy, that has mutated significantly.
Okay, so let's get into the scary stuff, the showstoppers.
I still love that they call them that. It's so blunt.
It's very direct, isn't it? Usually government guidance uses such soft language like critical focus areas or primary objectives, but showstoppers, that implies a hard stop, a brick wall.
It's a good no-go gate. That is the operational shift. In the past, especially with CMMC or even general NIST compliance, if you had an audit and you were missing a few things, you could often use a POM.
A plan of action and milestones.
Right. The I'll get to it later list.
The homework list you promised the teacher you'll do over the weekend.
Precisely. You'd say, okay, our multifactor authentication isn't 100% ruled out, but we have a plan to finish it in the next 6 months. And the government would usually say, fine, here's the contract, just get it done.
But not anymore.
The GSA has defined a specific list of 5 categories where a POAM is not an option. It's not on the table.
So if you show up to the GSA assessment with a POM for one of these 5 items, you don't get the contract.
You are denied immediately. The GSA's position is that a failure in these 5 areas is a fundamental failure to provide even basic safeguards. They're non-negotiable.
All right, let's walk through the list. Number 1 is multi-factor authentication, MFA. Now, I feel like everyone listening is probably nodding along and saying, yeah, obviously I have MFA on my email. We're good.
And that is exactly where they will fail, because the GSA isn't asking, do you have MFA enabled on your Office 365? They're asking, is MFA enforced on every single access point into the system that holds or processes CUI?
Give me an example of where that trips people up. What's the common mistake?
Legacy systems are a huge one. Or, and this is even more common, administrative access. Let's say you have a server room, physical or virtual, and you have an admin account, a privileged account that maybe 3 or 4 senior IT engineers share.
Emergency account.
Right, the break glass account. And because they're constantly logging in and out to fix things, they've turned off MFA for that specific account because it was, annoying to pass the token around.
The break glass account that slowly became the everyday convenience account.
Exactly. In the GSA's eyes, that is a showstopper, full stop. If there is a back door, a side door, a maintenance window that relies on a single password, you are blocked. It has to be comprehensive.
So no more shared admin accounts, no more, it's too old to support MFA excuses.
The GSA stance is, if it's too old to support modern authentication, it's too old to hold our data. End of story.
Okay. Number 2 on the list is access management.
This feels like a very close cousin to MFA. It is. They're related. But if MFA is the high-tech lock on the front door, access management is the process of deciding who gets a key and taking it back when they leave. It's all about the joiners, movers, and leavers process.
Joiners, movers, leavers, it sounds like a bad sitcom.
Chuckles. It might feel like one sometimes, but it's the life cycle of an employee's access. When someone new joins the company, how do they get access? Is it consistent? When they move departments, does their old access get properly revoked? And the most critical one, when they leave the company, how fast is that access cut off?
Oh, this is a big one. I've seen audits where a company still has active accounts for people who were fired 6 months ago.
And under this guidance, that is an immediate, undeniable showstopper. The GSA wants to see proof that you are actively managing this. It's not enough to say, we have a policy.
They want the logs.
They want the evidence. John Doe left on Friday at 5 o'clock p.m. Show me the log entry where his account was disabled at 5:01 p.m. If you can't produce that kind of evidence, you have an access management failure.
And a showstopper. Okay, number 3, vulnerability management.
This is a huge one for the technical teams. This is about patching. But again, like with MFA, it's not simply do you patch, it's how do you patch? What's the process?
Because everyone says they patch, yeah, we run Windows updates once a month.
Right. But the GSA is asking, do you continuously scan for vulnerabilities using an automated tool? Do you categorize them by severity? And do you have a
Hard documented deadline for fixing them based on that severity?
So it's about being proactive.
It's entirely about being proactive. If you are only patching when you hear about a massive hack on the news, that's reactive, that's a fail. They want to see the rhythm.
Scan, identify, patch, verify over and over.
And they want to see the metrics, the time to remediate. If a critical vulnerability comes out, say a CVSS score of 9 or 10, and your logs show it took you 45 days to get that patch deployed,
That could be a showstopper.
it very well could be. You're leaving the window of opportunity for an attacker open for far too long.
Number 4 on the list is cryptographic protections. Encryption.
Encryption at rest and in transit. This is standard NIST 800-171 stuff, but the GSA is being incredibly strict on the type of encryption. We are talking FIPS-validated cryptography.
FIPS, Federal Information Processing Standards. I know this is a headache for a lot of software developers and small businesses.
It is. It's a huge one because you can't just use any old open source encryption library you find on GitHub. It has to be the specific version that has gone through the FIPS validation process with NIST.
So if I'm sending CUI over email, it must be encrypted.
Yes, and with a fixed validated module, if it's sitting on a laptop, the hard drive must be encrypted. If it's on a USB drive, well, first of all, you should be asking yourself why you are using USB drives for CUI.
Fair point.
But if you are, it better be a fixed validated encrypted drive, no excuses.
The 5th and final showstopper is security tooling.
This one effectively kills the manual compliance model for good. You cannot secure a modern network with a clipboard and a checklist. You need active running tools.
Like what specifically?
At a minimum, modern antivirus, endpoint detection and response or ADR, and a security information and event management system, a CM, for logging and monitoring.
So if a contractor says, look, we're a small business, we can't afford a fancy CM that costs 6 figures, the GSA's response is?
The GSA's response is, then you cannot afford to hold our data.
That is a harsh reality.
It is, but you have to look at it from their perspective, from a risk perspective. If you don't have those tools, you are flying blind. You would not know if you were breached until it was too late, and the government is no longer willing to accept the risk of your blindness.
So that's the list: MFA, access management, vulnerability management, crypto, and tooling. If you treat these as simple checkboxes, or if you think you can POAM your way out of them, you are.
You're dead in the water. Correct. And that leads us directly to the how. How do you actually demonstrate all of this? This is where the GSA has introduced their 5-phase life cycle.
And they've adopted the NIST Risk Management Framework, the RMF, which for anyone who hasn't seen it is usually drawn as a circle.
It's a wheel of pain or a wheel of continuous improvement depending on your attitude.
A wheel of pain, I like that.
It is. It's a never-ending cycle. And that right there is a massive psychological shift for contractors. Most businesses are used to a linear project model. Start, work, finish, get paid.
A straight line.
The RMF is a circle: prepare, document, assess, authorize, monitor, and then that monitor phase leads right back into prepare for the next cycle. It never stops.
Let's break that down. Phase 1, prepare. This seems like the step everyone wants to skip because they just want to get to the doing.
And skipping it is absolutely fatal to the entire process. Phase 1 is system scoping and categorization. In the old days, a contractor might just say, well, our whole company is secure. We have a firewall protecting the building.
The castle and moat defense mentality.
Right, but the GSA says, no, that's not good enough. Tell us exactly, precisely where the CUI lives, which servers, which laptops, which cloud storage buckets. You have to draw a very clear boundary around the data.
And scoping is notoriously tricky. If you get it wrong, you either leave critical things unprotected or you try to protect everything and go broke.
That's the tightrope, exactly. If you underscope, you leave a server outside of your security boundary, it gets hacked and you are liable. But if you overscope, if you say the entire company network is the CUI boundary, now you are trying to apply FIPS encryption and strict MFA to the cafeteria menu system and the marketing department's Instagram phone.
You will bankrupt yourself trying to secure things that don't need that level of security.
Absolutely. So phase one is about surgical precision, drawing that line in the sand, and this is crucial, determining the specific privacy requirements up front before you write a single policy document. But we'll get to that privacy headache in just a moment.
Okay, so after prepare, we move to phase 2, document.
And the headline for phase 2 is very simple: ad hoc is dead.
Ad hoc being the Latin phrase for we just sort of figure it out as we go.
Blah, yes. And we figure it out as we go is no longer an acceptable security strategy. The GSA guidance explicitly states that informal or ad hoc practices are a failure.
What does an informal practice actually look like in the wild? Can you give an example?
It looks like heroics. It looks like one person, let's call him Bob, who is the only one who knows how to fix the main server when it crashes. No one else knows how Bob does it. There's no manual, there is no checklist. Bob just handles it.
And if Bob wins the lottery and moves to Fiji?
The company's entire security posture collapses. That is a classic ad hoc process. The GSA requires formalized processes. They want to see the standard operating procedure, the SOP. They want to see the new employee onboarding checklist version 2.1.
They want to see the paper trail.
They want to see the evidence that the process is repeatable, that it's consistent regardless of whether it's Bob or his replacement Jane who is running it.
So it takes the magic out of IT and turns it into a factory floor assembly line.
That is exactly what they want. Boring, reliable, documented consistency. You cannot prove you are secure to an auditor if you cannot first prove you have a process.
Okay. Now, within this documentation phase, we hit the section of our outline that I think is going to cause the most heartburn and confusion, Section 4, the privacy integration.
This is the plot twist in the movie.
Because most CMMC contractors have by now memorized NIST 800 to 171. They sleep with a copy of it under their pillow. But the GSA has brought a brand new and much thicker book to the study group, NIST SP 853.
Revision 5 to be specific, which is the monster catalog.
So, for the listener who isn't a total compliance nerd, what is the fundamental difference? Why do we need another number?
Okay, let's simplify it. NIST 800-171 is primarily designed for one thing: confidentiality. It's designed to keep secrets secret. It stops a foreign government from stealing the blueprints for the new fighter jet.
Got it. It's an anti-theft system.
Exactly. NIST 853, on the other hand, is the massive catalog of all security and privacy controls that the federal government uses for its own internal systems. It covers everything. But specifically for this conversation, it covers privacy.
And privacy is different from security. It's not the same thing.
Fundamentally different. Security is about keep the bad guys out. Privacy is about how do you ethically and legally handle the data of the people inside the system.
We're talking about PII, personally identifiable information.
Right? Names, social security numbers, home addresses, background check information, medical records.
And a lot of CUI contains PII.
Almost always, if you're a contractor processing personnel records for a federal agency or healthcare claims or even just visitor logs for a federal building, you are handling PII. NIST 800-171 doesn't really tell you how to handle the ethics and the rights associated with that data. It just says encrypt it.
So 853 asks the harder, more nuanced questions.
It asks things like, why do you have this data in the first place? Do you have the legal authority to collect it? How long are you keeping it for? Who has access to it, and do they actually need it for their job? That's the principle of least privilege. And do you have a privacy notice that clearly tells the user you have their data and what you're doing with it?
And the GSA now wants all of this documented formally.
Yes. And here is the implementation hurdle that is going to trip so many people up. They require integrated packages.
Meaning what exactly?
Meaning you cannot have a security plan written by the IT team and a privacy plan written by the legal team and have those two documents live in separate silos, never meeting.
They have to be developed together.
They have to be integrated. They have to speak to each other because they can conflict.
How so? Give me an example.
Think about it. Your security plan written by the security team might say, to prevent insider threats, we will log every single keystroke on every employee computer. From a pure security standpoint, that's great data.
Okay, I see where this is going.
Your privacy plan needs to look at that control and say, whoa, wait a minute. If you log every keystroke, you are capturing personal passwords to bank accounts, private emails to family members, and sensitive medical searches. That violates the privacy principle of data minimization.
Ah, okay. The security folks want to see everything. The privacy folks want to limit what is seen to only what's absolutely necessary.
Exactly, and the GSA requires you to have that debate and then reconcile it in the documentation. You have to map the privacy controls from 853 directly to your system. You have to show an auditor that you have considered the privacy impact of your security tools.
That is a heavy lift. I really don't want to understate that. For a lot of small and mid-sized businesses, SMBs, privacy has always been an afterthought. The logic was, we secure the data, so the privacy is taken care of.
The GSA is explicitly saying that logic is false. You can have a perfectly secure system that systematically violates everyone's privacy. You can build a Fort Knox that illegally spies on all its inhabitants. The GSA wants you to prove you aren't doing that.
Okay, so we've done the work. We have prepared in phase 1, we have documented in phase 2, including this new, very intense privacy headache. Now we have to prove it all. Phase 3, assess.
This is the evidence game, and the GSA outlines 2 main pathways here. Pathway 1 is GSA performed or reviewed.
That sounds intimidating, like the IRS coming to your house for an audit.
It's essentially that. The agency sends their own assessment team. They come on site or connect remotely. They interview your staff. They run their own vulnerability scans. They ask to see your firewall configs. It's invasive, it's stressful, but in a way it's straightforward. They tell you what they need to see.
Okay, and pathway 2?
Contractor-led.
Ah, the trap. It sounds so easy.
It sounds so appealing, doesn't it? Oh, great, I'll do it myself. I'll just grade my own homework.
But you're saying it's not self-attestation.
No, and we have to scream this from the rooftops. Contractor-led is not self-attestation. It's not even close.
Okay, explain the difference for us.
Health attestation is signing a letter that says, I comply. A contractor-led assessment means you are responsible for conducting the structured assessment activities that mirror exactly what the GSA's own auditors would have done if they'd shown up.
So you have to become the auditor of your own system.
You have to build a formal assessment plan. You have to execute hundreds of test cases. It's things like Test Case 1, verify MFA is active for all administrative accounts. Step 1, attempt to log into Server X with username and password only. Expected result, access denied. Actual result, access denied. See attached screenshot in Appendix A. You have to generate a mountain of evidence.
And then you just send that mountain of evidence over to the GSA?
You hand over the whole stack.
Okay.
And they review it. If your evidence is weak or it's vague, or if you just wrote compliant in a box without the screenshot to prove it, they will reject the entire package.
So in a way, contractor-led is almost harder because you have to do all the work and you have to worry about whether your documentation is clear enough for a complete stranger to understand and accept.
It requires a very high level of organizational maturity. You can't just wing it. You almost certainly need a dedicated internal team, or more likely a third-party assessment organization, a 3PAO, to come in and conduct it for you, even if it's officially contractor-led.
Which brings us to the next gate, Phase 4, authorize.
This is a really distinct step because it requires an explicit authorization decision.
It's not a passive acceptance.
No. In the old world, the one we're leaving behind, sometimes you'd submit your security paperwork, hear nothing for 6 months, and just keep billing the government. Silence was often interpreted as approval.
No news is good news.
That concept is gone. In this life cycle, there is a hard gate. A specific government official, the authorizing official, or AO, has to personally look at your entire package.
Everything? The security plan? The privacy docs?
Everything. They review the privacy documents, the results of the security assessment, the status of the showstoppers, and then they have to physically or digitally sign a piece of paper that says, I, the AO, accept the operational risk of allowing this system to process government data.
Wow, that puts a lot of personal pressure on that government official. They are putting their name on the line. If you, the contractor, get hacked, it's their signature on that authorization document.
Which is precisely why they are now so incredibly strict about the evidence you provide. They are not going to sign that paper if your vulnerability scanning reports are spotty. They are not going to sign it if your privacy documentation is vague. They need cover. Your evidence is their career cover.
They need to be able to say, in the event of a breach, look, I did my due diligence. The contractor provided evidence that they were secure.
Exactly. If you don't give them that proof, they will not give you their signature. And without that signature, you do not have an authority to operate an ATO. And without an ATO, you cannot legally process the data.
Okay, so let's say we've made it through the gauntlet. We prepped, we documented, we integrated privacy, we aced the assessment, we got the AO signature, we are authorized. We can pop the champagne, we're done.
I would put that cork right back in the bottle.
Wex, I knew you were going to say that. Why can't we celebrate?
Because we have now entered Phase 5, Monitor, and this is the official death of one-and-done compliance.
This is the real conflict with the typical CMMC mindset, right?
Mm-hmm.
CMMC, at least in its current iteration, has this 3-year audit cycle. You sprint like crazy to the finish line, you pass the audit, you get the certification, and then you can kind of exhale for a bit.
You let the gym membership lapse because you already took the perfect beach photo for your social media.
Right. But the GSA says
The GSA says absolutely not. The core requirement of the monitor phase is recurring evidence.
recurring how often? Daily? Weekly?
Oh, the exact cadence is determined by the GSA. It could be monthly, quarterly, or annually, depending on the system's data impact level, but the principle is what they call continuous oversight.
So I have to keep sending them screenshots and logs. For how long?
For the life of the contract, you have to keep sending them the deliverables, your monthly vulnerability scan reports, updated plans of action for any minor findings, the results of your annual incident response test. It creates a feedback loop.
So if I get my authorization and then I decide to save some money by turning off my expensive scanning tools,
The monitor phase catches you, you'll miss a reporting deadline, or you'll send a report that clearly shows the scans haven't actually run in 3 months.
and what happens then? They send you a warning letter?
What happens is your authorization can be revoked.
Revoked? Do you mean they can pull the plug on the contract midstream?
Absolutely. If you lose your ATO, you are legally barred from handling their data. If you can't handle the data, you are in breach of contract. They can terminate for cause.
That is an incredibly high-stakes game. It means you have to maintain what you called operational persistence.
That's the term, operational persistence. Compliance is not a snapshot in time, it's a movie. The GSA wants to watch that movie in near real time. They want to know that you are secure on Tuesday and on Wednesday and next February, not just on the single day the auditor visited last year.
This feels like a huge cultural shift for the entire industry. We are moving from a world of compliance, which is often about passing a test, to a world of true risk management, which is about being continuously healthy.
That is the philosophical core of the NIST risk management framework. Risks change constantly. New vulnerabilities are discovered every single day. A static audit certificate from 2 years ago tells me absolutely nothing about your security posture today. The GSA realizes that paper compliance is useless against modern threats. They need to know if you are secure right now.
So we've covered a massive amount of ground here. Let's try to summarize this for the listener who is maybe feeling a little overwhelmed and looking for the action items.
Let's boil it down to the absolute essentials.
First, the showstoppers. We're talking MFA, access management, vulnerability management, crypto, and security tools.
These are the absolute barriers to entry. If you do not have these 5 things fully operational in evidence, do not pass go, do not collect 200, no poems allowed.
Second, the big one, privacy. It's not just about security anymore. You need to formally integrate NIST 853 privacy controls into your core documentation.
No more silos. Your CISO and your general counsel need to be best friends. Security and privacy must speak the same language in a single integrated package.
Third, the life cycle. It's a circle. Prepare, document, assess, authorize, and monitor. And that monitor phase means you are on the hook for providing recurring evidence.
The feedback loop never closes. You are always in a state of being assessed, always proving your posture.
And the big final takeaway here, what's the headline?
The gap is gone. The line between defense and civilian contracting has been erased. The GSA has accelerated the entire process. They aren't waiting for the law. They are using their contractual power and procedural guidance to make this the reality on the ground today.
So if you're a contractor, you can't say, oh, I'm just civilian, I don't need to worry about that hardcore DoD stuff.
Not anymore. In fact, you might need to worry about it sooner than the DoD contractors because the GSA is moving so incredibly fast.
It's a race, and the GSA just put on running shoes while everyone else was still looking at the Pentagon lacing up its boots.
That's a really good way to put it.
So here's the thought I want to leave our listeners with. We've been talking about recurring evidence, sending reports every month or every quarter. But if the GSA is moving this fast without a formal rule, and they are demanding this constant stream of data, how long until we just stop sending reports entirely?
What do you mean by that?
I mean, how long until real-time automated reporting becomes the standard? If I have a vulnerability scanner running 24/7, and the government wants to know if I'm patching my systems, why am I exporting a PDF and emailing it to them? Why aren't they just plugging into an API and getting a live feed?
That is the logical conclusion of continuous monitoring, isn't it? I mean, programs like OSCL, the Open Security Controls Assessment Language, are built for exactly this machine-readable compliance data.
Exactly. Are we moving toward a world where the government literally has a live dashboard of your company's internal security posture? A world where they can see your red lights blinking on their screen, maybe even before your own security team does?
That raises some massive questions about corporate sovereignty and liability and, frankly, privacy. But from a purely technological standpoint, we are almost there. And if the GSA's stated goal is operational persistence, an automated dashboard is a whole lot more reliable than a quarterly PDF.
That is a very provocative thought to chew on. The monitor phase might just be the Trojan horse for a future of total automated transparency.
It's definitely a possibility. The wall between what's a government system and what's a contractor system is getting very, very thin.
Well, on that slightly dystopian but also highly efficient note, thank you for diving deep with us today. This GSA guidance is dense, it's complicated, but clearly ignoring it is not an option.
Absolutely not. The time to pivot your compliance program is now.
Stay curious, stay compliant, and please, for the love of all that is holy, keep those processes formal. We'll see you on the next deep dive.
A special thank you to MarketUS.com for furnishing us this information. You can reach them at MarketUS.com or call them at 954-636-3232. Before we go, this deep dive was created by the MarketUS.com team. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. It's right below the subscribe link.
If you found this video helpful, please consider donating to helpallvets.org. Thank you.